The neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place where the grass was kept at exactly 2.5 inches and the mailboxes were all the same shade of picket fence white. At the center of this manicured universe was Mrs. Beatrice Thorne, a woman who treated the homeowners association bylaws like the Ten Commandments. Beatrice didn't just live in Willow Creek, she patrolled it. From her upstairs window, she wielded a clipboard and a pair of high-powered binoculars. She was the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood character, which in her mind was a very specific, very beige aesthetic. So, when Marcus Reed moved into the long vacant Victorian on the corner of Elm and Maple, Beatrice was immediately on high alert. Marcus was a tall, athletic black man in his late 30s with a calm demeanor and a penchant for wearing hoodies while he worked on his classic Mustang in the driveway. "It's the optics, Arthur," Beatrice hissed to her husband over breakfast one Tuesday. "He's always under that car, oil stains, loud music, and have you seen those visitors, men in dark SUVs coming and going at odd hours? It's suspicious." Arthur, a man who had long ago learned that silence was the only path to peace, merely grunted. "He's a nice guy. B helped me carry the groceries yesterday, said he works in risk management." "Risk management? That's code for something," Beatrice snapped. "I'm going to keep an eye on him. We have rules here." The escalation. Over the next month, Marcus received a record-breaking 24 HOA violation notices. Grass length 2.7 inches violation. Trash cans left out 3 hours past pickup violation. Unauthorized vehicle maintenance in driveway violation. Marcus handled each notice with a polite if weary smile. He would trim the grass, pull the cans in, and move his car into the garage. He didn't want trouble. He had just moved back to his hometown after years of high-stress assignments in D.C., looking for the quiet life Willow Creek promised. But Beatrice didn't want compliance, she wanted him gone. She viewed Marcus's calm as arrogance. To her, every time he waved at a neighbor or jogged down the street, he was defying her authority. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Marcus was hosting a small gathering in his backyard, a few colleagues from his risk management firm. There was a grill going, the smell of jerk chicken wafting through the air and the low hum of jazz playing. Beatrice stood at her fence, fuming. "This is a residential neighborhood, not a festival grounds," she shouted over the fence. Marcus walked over holding a paper plate. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thorne. We're keeping the music low, but I'm happy to turn it down a notch if it's bothering you. Would you like a wing?" Beatrice recoiled as if he'd offered her a poisonous snake. "I want you to disband this gathering. It's a security risk. I've already contacted the board. We are implementing a new safety and security protocol." Marcus sighed. "Mrs. Thorne, we aren't breaking any laws, we're just having lunch." "We'll see about that," she muttered, turning on her heel. The security force. Beatrice didn't just contact the board, she took matters into her own hands. For months she had been championing a neighborhood safety patrol, a group of private security contractors she'd handpicked from a low-rent firm called Guardian Shields. In reality, they were just two men, Rick and Dave, who wore tactical vests, drove a blacked-out Crown Victoria with HOA enforcement decals, and acted like they were SEAL Team 6. They weren't real police, but Beatrice had convinced them, and herself, that they had the authority to detain and investigate anyone who threatened the peace of Willow Creek. "He's dangerous," Beatrice told Rick and Dave as they pulled up to her driveway an hour later. "I believe there is illegal activity occurring. Drugs, perhaps, or worse. I want him removed from the premises immediately. Use whatever force is necessary for a citizen's arrest." Rick, a man who clearly missed the cut for the actual police academy, adjusted his belt. "We'll handle it, Mrs. Thorne. We take neighborhood safety seriously." The confrontation. Marcus was in his kitchen getting more napkins when he heard the heavy thud of boots on his porch. Through the window, he saw the HOA enforcement car and two men in tactical gear stepping onto his property. He stepped out the front door, closing it behind him. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "Marcus Reed?" Rick barked, hand resting on a can of pepper spray. "We've had reports of suspicious activity and noise violations. You're being ordered to vacate the outdoor area and submit to a premises inspection." Marcus blinked, genuinely confused. "A premises inspection? By whom? Your private security. You have no legal right to be on my porch." We represent the Willow Creek HOA Security Division, Dave chimed in, stepping closer. Under the new bylaws, we have the authority to detain individuals pending a formal police arrival if they refuse to comply with community standards. Behind them, Beatrice had gathered on the sidewalk along with several other neighbors who had come out to see the commotion. She had her phone out, recording. "Record this, everyone," she called out. "We're finally taking our neighborhood back." Marcus's expression shifted. The weariness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp intensity. "I'm going to ask you once to leave my property. You are trespassing." "You're under arrest," Rick said, pulling out a pair of heavy-duty zip ties. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The neighbors gasped. Arthur, Beatrice's husband, finally spoke up from the back of the crowd. This is too much. They aren't real cops." "Shut up, Arthur," Beatrice snapped. "They're doing what needs to be done." As Rick reached out to grab Marcus's arm, something happened that no one expected. Marcus didn't flinch. In one fluid motion, he caught Rick's wrist, twisted it slightly to keep the man off balance, and reached into his back pocket. He didn't pull a weapon, he pulled a leather wallet and flipped it open. "I am Special Agent Marcus Reed with the Department of Homeland Security," he said, his voice echoing with a weight that stopped Rick in his tracks. "And you are currently interfering with a federal officer and attempting an unlawful kidnapping. Get your hands off me now." The tables turned. The silence that followed was absolute. Rick and Dave froze. They looked at the gold badge, then at the very real, very official credentials staring back at them. This must be a mistake," Dave stammered, backing away. "We were told there was a security threat." "The only security threat here is you two," Marcus said, his voice like ice. He looked past them toward Beatrice, who looked like she had just swallowed a lemon, and Mrs. Thorne. Marcus pulled a cell phone from his pocket and dialed a 3-digit number. "This is Agent Reed, ID 4492. I need a local PD unit and a supervisor at my residence. I have 2 armed individuals impersonating officers and attempting a false arrest on my property. Yes, I'm secure. Send them now." He tucked the phone away and looked at Rick. "Don't move. If either of you reaches for those belts, I will treat it as a direct threat to a federal agent. Stay exactly where you are." Rick and Dave, who were essentially glorified mall guards, looked like they wanted to melt into the pavement. 10 minutes later, the real police arrived, sirens blaring, lights flashing. A Sergeant Marcus knew well. Sergeant Miller hopped out of the lead cruiser. "Marcus, what's going on?" Miller asked, looking at the 2 enforcement officers standing sheepishly on the lawn. "These 2 tried to arrest me on my own porch, Miller," Marcus said, stepping down. "Commissioned by the HOA president over there. They're armed with pepper spray and batons, and they've been harassing me for weeks. Today they crossed the line into felony territory." Sergeant Miller turned to Rick and Dave. "Zipties, really? Hands behind your backs, boys. You're going downtown for impersonating a peace officer and assault." The downfall of Beatrice Thorne. As the HOA police were being loaded into the back of a real police car, Sergeant Miller turned his attention to Beatrice. She was pale, her phone lowered, her bravado evaporating like mist in the sun. "Mrs. Thorne," Miller said, walking over to the sidewalk, "did you hire these men to perform police duties?" I was protecting the community," she stammered. "He's been a nuisance, the bylaws." "The bylaws don't supersede the United States Code, Beatrice," Marcus said, walking over to stand beside the sergeant. "You used a private security firm to attempt a citizen's arrest based on 0 evidence of a crime. That's called solicitation of kidnapping and filing a false police report." "I didn't know you were a Fed," she cried out, as if that were the only thing she had done wrong. "That shouldn't have mattered," Marcus said quietly. "If I were a plumber or a teacher or unemployed, what you did today would still be a crime. You didn't see a neighbor, you saw a target." The neighborhood was no longer watching a heroic enforcement of rules. They were watching a woman face the consequences of her own prejudice. Neighbors who had previously stayed silent began to speak up. "She's been harassing everyone, officer," one neighbor called out. "She threatened to fine me because my kid's bike was on the lawn for 10 minutes. "She's a menace," another shouted. Sergeant Miller sighed. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm not arresting you today, pending an investigation by the district attorney. but Marcus is filing a formal complaint and I suggest you go inside and call a lawyer. Because when the federal government gets involved in a harassment suit, it doesn't end well for the HOA. The resolution. The following weeks saw a seismic shift in Willow Creek. The safety and security protocol was immediately dismantled by the rest of the HOA board, who were terrified of being named in Marcus's impending lawsuit. Beatrice Thorne resigned from the board in disgrace. She rarely left her house, and when she did, she no longer carried a clipboard. The white picket fence perfection of the neighborhood began to soften. People started planting different kinds of flowers. Kids played in the streets. Marcus stayed. He finished his Mustang, the engine roaring to life one sunny afternoon to the cheers of the neighborhood kids. He didn't sue the HOA into bankruptcy. He was a fair man, but he did insist on a settlement that funded a new community park and a mandatory sensitivity training program for the board. One evening, Marcus was sitting on his porch when Arthur, Beatrice's husband, walked by. Arthur stopped, looking hesitant, then gave a small wave. "Car sounds good, Marcus," Arthur said. "Thanks, Arthur, almost done with the upholstery," Marcus replied. Arthur lingered for a moment. "I'm sorry about everything, she gets carried away." "The world is bigger than a set of bylaws, Arthur," Marcus said kindly. "Hope she figures that out eventually." As Arthur walked away, Marcus looked out at the street. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the lawns. For the first time since he'd moved in, the neighborhood felt like a home rather than a battlefield. He was a federal officer trained to spot threats and manage risks. But as he watched his neighbors chatting over fences and heard the distant sound of a lawnmower, likely an inch too high, he realized the greatest risk to any community wasn't the person who didn't fit in. It was the person who refused to let them. Marcus went inside, locked his door, and finally enjoyed the quiet life he had earned. The HOA Karen had tried to arrest a threat, but in the end, she had only succeeded in liberating the neighborhood from herself.